Hi everyone, welcome back. Thanks for joining us today. We've got a brand new story to share with you. So let's begin. My name is Brandon, and I've come to learn that life can change so fast. It's crazy to think about, but in just 3 years, everything I thought was permanent in my life flipped upside down. You see, never in my wildest dreams did I think I would ever cross paths with my ex-wife again. But I did. And when I saw her, she cried. I wish I could tell you that I knew exactly how I felt at that moment, but I didn't. I didn't know if I should feel happy that life turned around for me or sad because of how much I had to lose before it did. But to understand how we got here, how we went from being husband and wife to strangers at an event, I have to take you all the way back to the beginning, because none of this makes sense without the full picture. Looking back, I first met Catherine at the local gym where she worked at the front desk. I'd been going to that gym for a while, and she was friendly. But one day, we actually started talking. And I'll tell you, there was just something about her. We started chatting more often. The conversations flowed, and I found myself looking forward to seeing her. It didn't take long before we started dating. At first, I wasn't sure what to expect. But after a year and a couple of months together, I honestly thought I knew everything there was to know about her. We spent time together and went on dates. I was sure we were perfect for each other. I felt like I'd found someone I could trust, someone I could spend the rest of my life with. So, I decided it was time to take things to the next step. I proposed to her. She said yes, and we got married. At the time, everything seemed perfect. I was working as a back-end software engineer at Airbnb. The job paid well, and I had a stable future ahead of me. I didn't have to worry too much about money, and I was able to take care of things around the house. Catherine, on the other hand, was still working at the gym. And while I didn't have a problem with it at first, I knew she deserved more. She was smart, capable, and had potential far beyond sitting behind a desk all day. I suggested she quit her job and try freelancing. I offered to teach her some of the skills I knew, stuff that would make her a lot more money than what she was making at the gym. I thought it was a no-brainer. With my stable income, I could support both of us while she got started. So she agreed. She left the gym, and we both dove into a new chapter. We didn't have kids yet, but we were hopeful. We didn't know it then, but this was the calm before the storm. When the pandemic hit, everything came crashing down. No one saw it coming. I mean, how could we? One day, everything was fine, and the next, the world was forced to shut down. The shutdown affected Airbnb badly. Like many others, I got caught in the layoffs. They didn't even give me a proper reason for why they picked me, but I guess in a crisis like that, it didn't matter. The lockdowns made it hard to find another job right away. There were hardly any openings, and the few that existed were flooded with people who were also out of work. So, I decided to turn my attention to personal projects I had been putting off for a while. The money I was making from it wasn't even close to what I had earned at Airbnb. It was enough to cover some bills, but it wasn't enough to keep up with our old lifestyle. So, I had to sit Catherine down and talk to her. I told her, look, we need to downgrade. The money I'm making right now won't be enough to keep us living the way we were before. We have to cut back on some things. I figured she'd understand. But that's when the tension started building. She didn't take it well at all. I also told her that since I wasn't bringing in as much, she'd need to pitch in. We both had to carry our weight, especially in times like these. But instead of understanding, it felt like I dropped a bomb on her. Her attitude shifted overnight. She didn't say anything at first, but I could see it. I could feel the change. The small arguments we used to have suddenly turned into huge blowouts. Things that never bothered us before became a huge deal. I'd ask her if she could help with something, and she'd snap back at me like I was bothering her. But it didn't stop there. She started saying things that hurt. She would call me lazy, tell me I wasn't trying hard enough, and that I wasn't good enough anymore. All this when I was just trying to figure out how to make things work. I mean, it wasn't my fault the world had gone upside down. I had no idea what happened to the woman I had married. It felt like she was turning into someone completely different. We were drowning in stress, and instead of coming together and supporting each other, we were growing further apart. Honestly, It made me feel completely lost. She wasn't just unhappy about the situation. She constantly blamed me. Everything became my fault in her eyes. I wasn't fixing things fast enough. And that was the breaking point. The lockdown had just been lifted in our city, and people were finally starting to breathe again after being cooped up indoors for months. Catherine came to me casually and said she needed to travel down to see her parents, just to check up on them. It sounded harmless, and honestly, after being stuck inside for so long, I figured a little change of scenery might do her some good. At the time, I thought maybe the trip would help her clear her head and even help us both cool off from all the tension we'd been dealing with. But from the moment she left, it didn't take long before I noticed that I was always the one reaching out. I'd text. She'd reply hours later with one-word answers. I'd call. She'd either ignore it or sound like I just interrupted something important. Her tone was cold, almost like she was irritated that I even tried to talk to her. I felt the distance growing. After a few weeks of trying to keep the communication going, I started dialing back. There was only so much rejection I could take before it started to chip away at my dignity. That's when I recalled she never gave me a return date. When she left, she just said she was going to her parents. But there was no, I'll be back by next week or next. 2 months passed, and the silence between us had stretched so far. That's when I finally asked her, "When are you coming back?" Her answer? "I'm only coming to pick up my things. I've decided to end the marriage." I froze. I couldn't process this reply. Sure, we had our issues, and yes, the financial stress from losing my job during the pandemic had taken a toll on us. But divorce? That wasn't something I thought she'd just throw out so casually. There wasn't even a conversation. She'd made up her mind and didn't see the need to explain. She told me she didn't want any physical assets. She said she just wanted a cash settlement, so we could avoid going through court or dragging lawyers into it. I couldn't even fight it. At that point, I was too emotionally drained to argue. So I agreed. We talked numbers and settled on an amount, and that was it. Just like that, 6 years of marriage were signed away over a couple of bank transfers and a few cold text exchanges. But nothing prepared me for the day she came to pack up her stuff. When she did, she didn't look at me. She walked straight past me, gathered her things, and left. I stood there, in the middle of that apartment we used to share, feeling like someone had taken a sledgehammer to my chest. I can't even describe how it felt. What followed after that was one of the darkest periods of my life. There were days I didn't know if I was going to make it to the next. I won't sugarcoat it. There was a point when I seriously thought about ending it all. I was that low. If not for a few close friends who refused to let me drown, who came to check on me, dragged me out of bed, forced food into me, and just sat with me in silence when words didn't help. I don't know if I'd still be here telling this story. That whole chapter scarred me in ways I never imagined. But as painful as it was, it forced me to face the truth. She was gone. And if I wanted to survive, if I wanted to find myself again, I had to accept it and start over. I decided that if life had kicked me to the ground, I was going to rise back up with something to show for the pain. That was when I buried myself in work. I started pouring every hour of my day into something that had always been on the back burner. My projects. I treated it like therapy. I'd wake up, code, read, build, test, fail, start again, and I'd repeat that every day. I wasn't making 6 figures. Heck, most months, I barely made enough to stay afloat. But I was driven. I didn't just want success anymore. I needed it to prove to myself that I wasn't finished just because my marriage was. 2 years passed like that. Then, something changed. One of my AI tools, something I initially built as a side feature, started gaining traction. At first, it was small companies reaching out to test it. Then it snowballed. Word spread. Bigger companies began reaching out to explore integration. At first, I thought it was a fluke, but when the emails kept coming in, I realized I had something real on my hands. Something valuable. Not long after, I got an email that I'll never forget. A major tech company, one I used to admire from afar when I worked at Airbnb, was interested in buying my company outright. I remember sitting there, just staring at the screen, rereading it 100 times. I called my team. We met and talked. And when we finally got the numbers, I couldn't believe it. It was more money than I ever dreamed of earning. Not just life-changing, it was generational. We didn't hesitate. My team and I voted unanimously to accept the deal. But that wasn't even the biggest shock. As part of the acquisition, they offered me a long-term partnership role with the parent company. I wasn't just selling out and walking away. I was becoming part of the very system I used to look up to. That day, I sat in my apartment, quietly staring at the email confirming the deal. No parties, no champagne, no one to hug. Just me, sitting with the weight of everything I'd been through, finally realizing I made it. It's been a long time since Catherine walked out of my life. But one random afternoon, I was grabbing a quick coffee when I ran into an old friend of mine, Tom. We hadn't seen each other in a long while, and the news of my acquisition made me popular. So we caught up for a few minutes. Then, out of nowhere, he asked how I was doing after what happened with Catherine. I told him I was doing better and just focused on work. He nodded, then said something that froze me in place. He said, "Crazy how that guy left her after the construction job wrapped up. Guess she's single again." I was like, "Wait, what guy? What construction job?" That's when he looked confused, like maybe I already knew. But I didn't. So he explained that during the lockdown, Catherine had moved in with this guy, some construction engineer she had apparently been seeing behind my back. Tom worked on a nearby project, and he remembered seeing them together multiple times. I immediately realized she didn't go to her parents like she told me. Tom told me he tried to reach me when he began seeing her more frequently, but his calls kept going to voicemail. I remember that, after the divorce, I was ignoring the world. Tom continued that Catherine's new guy was part of a big building project, and as soon as it was completed, he packed up and left her. Hearing that hit me harder than I expected. Even after everything, I never fully let myself believe she had been cheating while we were still married. I wanted to think maybe things just fell apart. But now, knowing she had been living a double life broke me all over again. The truth didn't just hurt, it reopened wounds I thought had closed. Still, I didn't let it drag me back into that hole. I'd come too far to let her betrayal define my future. My life was already turning a corner. So, fast forward to a few months after hearing from Tom. The company that bought out my startup was hosting their annual corporate event. A black tie kind of thing with all the glam and spotlight. Since I was now a partner, they invited me to give a speech. It was a huge deal, and I wasn't about to show up looking average. I went all out. I looked in the mirror before leaving, and for the first time in a long time, I actually felt proud of the man staring back at me. The event was held at one of those high-end hotels downtown. Everything was polished, from the lighting to the jazz band playing in the corner. When they called me up to the stage to speak, I walked up there with confidence. I had already written my speech days ago, but as I looked down from the stage, something threw me completely off balance. Sitting at one of the tables, dressed in a sleek emerald green gown, was my ex-wife, Catherine. She looked just like I remembered, beautiful and poised. But the sight of her shocked me. What was she even doing there? I found out later that she came as a +1 to one of the guests. But at that moment, standing on that stage with all eyes on me, I had to make a decision, stick to the speech I had prepared or speak from the heart. I chose the second. I started talking about patience. Sometimes in life, you lose things before you gain better things. I talked about trusting the process, even when everything around you feels like it's falling apart. About how pain can either destroy you or shape you into someone better. To the executives and business partners in the room, it sounded like I was praising the company's long-term strategy. They were nodding and smiling, thinking I was making some deep metaphor about growth and success. But the truth? That entire speech was for her. Every line, every pause. It was me talking to the woman who left me when I had nothing. By the time I finished and stepped off the stage, I glanced in her direction again. She was crying, dabbing her face with tissue, trying to keep it together. I didn't know exactly what part hit her the hardest, but I knew she understood the message. I left that stage with my head held high. I mingled with clients and execs, shook hands, and answered questions, just soaking in the moment. But I noticed something. Catherine kept watching me from across the room. Her eyes followed me like she was trying to find a window to pull me aside and talk. But I was busy, surrounded by people. She never got the chance. Then, about a week later, I got a message from an unknown number. It was short, just a simple, "Can we meet? I'd really like to talk." I knew exactly who it was. Catherine. I stared at the message for a bit. I left it on read. Then I blocked the number. I didn't want to open that door. Not after everything. 3 years had passed since she walked out on me. And honestly, I don't know what she wanted to say. Maybe she wanted to apologize. Maybe she missed what we had. But the truth? I don't care anymore. That chapter is closed. And I'm not about to flip back through those pages. Not when I've written something better since then. Looking back at everything that happened, it forced me to learn some hard but important lessons about life, about people, and myself. One of the biggest lessons I learned is this: patience matters. When everything came crashing down during the pandemic, I was scared. I didn't know how long it would take for things to get better. There were moments when I couldn't even see past the next day. But if I had rushed into things, if I had made decisions from a place of fear or anger, I don't think I'd be where I am today. Rebuilding wasn't quick. There were nights I couldn't sleep and days I felt empty. But I focused on what I could control, even when everything else felt out of control. Eventually, the pieces started coming together. It didn't happen overnight, but it happened because I kept going. Another thing I want to say is don't give up on yourself. I came so close to doing that. I was depressed, humiliated, and broken. I didn't think I had anything left in me. If I had given up, I wouldn't have created that AI project. I wouldn't have met the amazing team that helped me build something great. I wouldn't have gotten that buyout deal. And I definitely wouldn't be standing at that corporate event watching the same woman who left me wipe her tears while I gave a speech. So if you're watching this and you're in that dark place right now, please don't give up on yourself. You have no idea what the future might bring if you just hang in a little longer. Finally, pain can be fuel for your purpose. I used to think pain was just something that happened to you. But now I see it as something that can push you, shape you if you let it. Everything I built came from that pain. I wasn't trying to get revenge or prove anything to anybody. I just refused to let that pain go to waste. I turned it into motivation. That's how I got here. Now let me ask you, what would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have blocked her like I did? Would you have responded to that message? Would you have taken her back? I want to hear from you in the comments. Seriously, your thoughts matter. This isn't just my story. It's something a lot of people go through in different ways. And if you got something from this story, if it made you think or helped you feel seen, please give it a like and share it. It really helps the channel grow and lets me keep telling real stories like this. Thanks again for watching, and take care of yourself out there.